Well, hello everyone. This is Data Driven Chat, and today I'm really happy to introduce Bernardo Nunes, who is a data scientist at Growth Tribe, and also a public speaker, and he practices behavioral data science. And I'm particularly excited today because he kind of does what I do, but in the real world, I can say in practice. So hi, Bernardo. Great to
Hi,
have you with us today.
thanks for the invitation. Very good to be here to talk in this sense, what you also said you do, behavioral data science.
Right, we have a whole group at the Alan Turing Institute and Behavioral Data Science, and there people come from all walks of life. But today we will talk mostly about your experience. And in your LinkedIn profile, it says that you do basically you concentrate on data science and with regard to kind of understanding consumer behavior, providing solutions that support various business decision making. So how did you become interested in this field? And if you could tell our audience a little bit about your personal story. So how did you get into it?
Yeah, so first I would say that the interest in behavioral science specifically was during the time that I worked for the Behavioral Science Center at the University of Stirling in Scotland. I worked there for 4 years. I did my PhD there, and there I had contact with a group of researchers that they were working with, large-scale data, personality traits, specifically looking at consumer behavior, life choices, and in my case, the research was on financial behavior, savings, and debt burden. So there I started to add, let's say, the other social sciences and also got familiar with other quantitative methods as well. So this was the contact I have. Before that, I had a career in finance. I was an asset manager, but I always had contact with behavioral economics. I did theses, dissertations, everything that I could do before the PhD in the field of behavioral economics, choice under risk, decision making, and so on. But when I decided to do the PhD, then there were no scholarships at that time from behavioral economics or behavioral science research centers. This was around 2010. And around 2012, 2013, I started to see some offers, and I started to apply to them. Mm-hmm. So I quit the career as asset manager, and I decided to pursue the PhD at that time. So this was the main intersection I had, and it was almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, sounds great. So if I asked you to pick one most important thing that you have done in your career, what would it be? What would you pick? Something you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, so when I finished the PhD in Scotland, it was in the middle of the Brexit. And so it was very hard to find a job there as an expat. You know, I'm Brazilian. I would have to find a sponsor. So that was a particularly challenging period for me. But then I got to know this company from Amsterdam that I work now, Growth Tribe, and I applied for a position there. I knew they were just a scale up at that time, 4 years ago, but they were launching training programs and helping companies in the city of Amsterdam to apply experiments to grow, be more data driven. And they also had a very interesting culture, like a startup, more agile, and so on. So I applied, and the first project they gave me to work on was to launch a course that would allow marketeers to add more predictions in their experimentation process. So they were already, implementing process of experimentation in customer journeys, how to understand the customer, layouts for websites, features for apps, and so on. But then I helped to build this first course that was using machine learning, analytics, to add also these more quantitative skills to their skill set, let's say. And it was very successful. After that, it was not the only reason, but the company grew a lot. Nowadays, we are more than 100 people, and we are in more than 5 countries. So I really like the experience I had in the first year here in Amsterdam, working in that specific bigger project, let's say.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, the next thing I wanted to ask you was about, as a practitioner, you do probably a large number of projects, right? So as an academic, I know I do a handful a year, but you probably do quite a lot of them. So what was the most exciting project that you have done to date? If you can talk about it, of course. I mean, I understand that, there are some restrictions probably on what you can say in public, but if you could give an example of one, that'd be great.
No, it was not here at Growth Tribe. Here we do many with the companies that they come to our trainings, but the one that was very, let's say, not innovative in terms of methods, but in terms of the data and the research question, was when I was working as a research assistant for the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK. It was part of a project looking at the psychological effects of debt burden using data from a household survey, the Wealth and Asset Survey. And I was, the junior assistant working with the coding part of the project, and it was a huge experience for me to, work with larger data sets and do the coding part, the building part. It was my first, let's say, data science project because I was part there of the, I think it's called behavioral and data science team or unit. Stefan Hunt was the coordinator, and this gave me this opportunity to work again with this team and to research this, let's say, this or more novel question involving finance and psychology.
So I just want to kind of go a little bit in depth here. So you said that you came from behavioral science background. I mean, I'm coming from decision theory background, and you had to learn machine learning and data science. So was that challenging for you? Was that quite natural? And how did you do it? So was it all learning by doing, or did you take some online courses? And what have you done for it? Did you study, I don't know, Python? Did you study R? So a lot of people who listen to this conversation, will listen to this conversation, actually are aspiring data scientists, and they always ask questions about, what is the best path towards this?
Yeah, the path back in 2014 was very different than the path that would be taken today. Later on, we can explore more of that, because basically what I do for work is also help young talent to upskill in data-related subjects. But back then, my background helped a lot, because my supervisor was a researcher in behavioral science, but he was teaching econometrics in the program I was following. And time series helps a lot in machine learning. If you don't know anything about machine learning, but you also have done some time series forecasting, you also have to do back tests. You also have a training and test set. So I borrowed a lot of things. I discovered that they were the same things, but just with different names. and that was very helpful. I did some personal training, some self-study. At that time, there were not too many courses. I was lucky enough that when I implemented this first course here in Amsterdam at Growth Tribe, the first low-code tools were being launched. So, for example, at that time, I used an open source software called Orange from the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia, that you can do machine learning without coding. So that was very helpful for us in the training. And there was a startup from France at that time called Data IQ that also had the same value proposition, but for machine learning in production. So I could use this no-code skills required tool that is also professional and used by data scientists to make this transition easier for me and for the people later on that I was helping to develop these skills. Nowadays, Data IQ is a $1 billion company. After 3 years, they grew a lot, and it proved that the value proposition was very helpful for the market as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
So nowadays,
yeah. So that's what was my next question. Sorry to interrupt. But, so
No.
if I ask you to give advice to people who want to get into kind of data science for consumer choice or behavioral data science as we call it, what would be your advice? Where should they start? So some people think that it's they need to go get a degree. Some people think that they just need to do a lot of self-study and just the projects. So what would be your advice to those who are trying to get into data science?
Yeah, data science is the field of making data useful in an organization or in a team of people working together. But it involves two main areas. You need to have domain knowledge in one particular industry, or within a set of research or business questions, and you also need to have quantitative skills, like be analytical. And in this sense, there are two main career paths. Or you are a more analytical person, and then you acquire this business savviness with experience, which is difficult. Or you come from the line of business, and then you acquire the analytical skills, which is also difficult. That's why it's very rare to find a data scientist that has both of these things. Also, it's difficult to find people from the line of business that they can at least evaluate proof of concepts propositions coming from the analytical side. There is a huge gap in organizations now because of that. Most of the projects in data science, they die for technical reasons, but also because there was a lack of communication, difficulty to translate the results to the rest of the organization, and so on. So paying particular attention to this intersection is very important. So if you're coming from the line of business, if you are an UX designer, or if you are a business analyst, whatever, and you what we suggest is add data to your skill set. So you don't need to become a data wrangler, one of the three main professions: data analyst, data engineer, data science, but you can be this translator that is able to consume this information, to evaluate this information. You need to know the metrics. You need to be familiar with proportion, ratios, trends, segments, patterns. So you are able to evaluate the work of others and advise the organization which of these options should be pursued. So you need to be helping or be the decision maker that reduces costly mistakes by making usage of data. And most of the time, this doesn't involve knowing machine learning. You just need to know, for example, that machine learning is the type of proof of concept that will give you personalization, will give you scoring, will give you recommendations, will give you propensities. So it will tell you in an heterogeneous group who are the targets, the best targets for your intervention. And you will complement this with experimentation to tell which interventions are the most effective for each of those particular groups.
Yeah, and also
And
I
so,
guess you also need to understand the drawbacks, right? Not only the advantages, but also that some of the, that you cannot use this training set for this model and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's where normally, to me, the challenge lies there, because a lot of people, I don't know your experience, but in my experience, many people view data science as some sort of magic wand, like you come and you transform everything.
yeah.
But very few understand the challenge. I mean, everyone heard about ethical challenges, but I think the technical details about usage of data science in particular settings is lacking.
When we create a capability building training, let's say, we differentiate between what managers, I call them ambassadors, evaluators, and the core data wranglers they need. You cannot have in an organization everyone being extreme data literate. It's impossible. People have, even cognitive limitations towards quantitative methods and some personality differences as well. So what you need to have is a community of practice with people that they are able to evaluate. And when I say evaluate, it means knowing what is feasible, profitable, and ethical, and the metrics, to balance them. Same thing happens in IT, in other areas. Many people are hands-off. They are not hands-on, but they know, they have expertise. They are able to evaluate propositions. And then you have the core data wranglers, the typical professions that create the pipeline, they create the proof of concepts, that also have problems to present results in a visual way. They don't use yet much design thinking when creating stories or slides, for example, that are the biggest way of communication in organizations nowadays. And all this should be taken care of. Otherwise, you have a few frequent bottlenecks in this communication between the data sources and the decision maker that is at the end of the process.
So you obviously can look at this from a practitioner standpoint, and you've observed this transformation that we've seen in business towards data, right? I think 5 years ago, very few people heard about data science, not to mention did it. So in your opinion, why is data so important for business now, and how did it transform business, or if it transformed business? So maybe it's all we observe at the moment is just some unrealized potential. So it has potential to transform business, but it didn't transform it. So in your opinion, what is this relationship between data and business? And
so I explained this data and analytics focus that exists today as a follow-up of digital transformation that companies went through in the last 10 years. So I usually tell a story that starts with digitization. This is when, for example, for the first time in the workplace, we started to exchange information in the digital format, like I think the fax machine is the biggest example of this time. But later on, we started to digitalize processes, and this is when we started to buy the first personal computers for our households and workplaces. We didn't know what to do with them, but we figured out that we could send emails, buy products, and so on. And this became the era of PowerPoint, Excel, reporting with PDFs and stuff in corporates. But at some point, companies, they reverse engineer this process. They started to have access to information from the customer side, more information. They started to perceive needs and goals more easily because now we have a website, we know where they click, we now have a CRM database, so we know what they purchased historically. The data was not only transactional, but it was also behavioral and giving a sense to the business of their choices and preferences. So this is what triggered the digital transformation, because then companies, they, among many other things, they start to build devices having in mind a customer need. It was not from product to customer, but from starting with the customer. This was the jargon of that time. And Apple, for example, did this well when they launched the iPod Shuffle. The customer pain was that we wanted to have access to 1,000 songs to listen while we were commuting or working out. And then they designed a device that would attend this particular customer need. Nowadays, we have the smartphone, which is a supercomputer compared to the computing power from the past, that can have many other applications inside there. And this smartphone works as a questionnaire. It is a digital questionnaire that customers are passively or actively filling out. This is Mikhail Kozinski phrase. But it's a reality. Customer IDs, when we have a customer ID that identifies us across different channels with the same brand or a smartphone, we are giving the examples that companies, they would need to map our customer journeys, to look at the bottlenecks where we are not buying what they would like us to buy, or which features we use more in an application. And all this helps to redesign products and process. This means that there is a lot of examples, in this case, the data, that can be used to improve products and processes. But data per se has no value. What has value is the scoring systems, the recommendations, the propensities, the estimates that we get when we run an experiment, in this case with experimental data. This is what becomes a way to monetize and to increase the economic value of the data you have. The extraction and the collection of data per se, it is like in academia when the government runs a household survey and there are no researchers using it, right? It's only when we have research questions and we publish a paper and that paper gets read by others. This is the same in business, and this involves a lot of infrastructure, engineering, and governance to put everyone up to speed in this usage.
Mm-hmm. We talked a lot about skills, and I want to come back. You talked in general about kind of skill sets within organizations and how you cannot, not everyone has to be a data scientist, basically. But I wanted to ask you specifically about company leadership and C-suite executives. So quite a few of them are my students, and for some reason, the recent trend, what I see from where I stand, is that a lot of them believe that they do need technical expertise. So what is your opinion on this? If you are a C-suite executive, do you need a conceptual understanding of data science, or do you actually need to get kind of your hands dirty and learn some coding and get more skilled in this? What would be your response?
Yeah, so the first thing that helps us to understand this is understand the actors or the contributors, or what we call internally for us as personas, the people who would benefit from knowing these things. And you have three levels of contributors: the ambassadors, which are your students, the C levels. They are ambassadors because they don't get involved with the hands-on the developing of the proof of concepts or the projects in the technical sense, but they need to be able to evaluate the work a bit, and they need to help the company to find out which applications they can be solved with a particular technology. In this case, with predictions, for example, or experiments, let's say the two most mature applications. So the ambassadors are here, but you need some evaluators or translators, people, the product owners, the project managers, the product managers, that they are making this midfield between the line of business and the analytics teams, the data science teams, depends on your infrastructure. And then you need the core professions, like the core wranglers, the data scientists, data engineers, data analysts. And these guys are the ones that they need to be able to understand, evaluate, and build as well. The problem is that most of the training or the capacity building programs that we have, when they have ambassadors in their program, they only teach them to understand and a bit of evaluation. So, for example, in our programs, we create the ability for the ambassador to understand and evaluate, but they also do some hands-on exercises. In this case, with software that does not require coding, but helps them to visualize the end-to-end solution. So they understand the steps of integration in the data pipeline, the iterations to train and test a model, for example, or how to evaluate the statistical significance of an A/B test. And finally, how do you put this into production? It's just going from the descriptive to the predictive phase and then the prescriptive phase. You know, even if you give training to ambassadors, to the C-levels, executives, you need to make them at least once do some hands-on practice in this controlled environment that is a classroom, so they get a sense. You know, it's not only in data science. When you teach nowadays chief marketing officers to understand how people create landing pages for websites, they are accustomed to the big decision day mindset of making a huge project to redesign the whole website. And nowadays, companies that apply experimentation, they do these changes bit by bit with a lot of A/B tests and iterations. So you need to put them in a classroom, in a training, for example, and at least once they produce a landing page totally without code, with very easy drag and drop tools, so they get a sense of how agile, how fast the production of a layout, a design for a website is nowadays, and that they don't need to spend a lot of resources before testing for the first results.
Mm-hmm. So obviously we cannot avoid the topic of COVID, and from your standpoint, so from what you do, how do you think data science could help, or do you think it could help in the first place? So because there were people on this in this series who said we better not touch this field and let the professionals deal with it. So yeah, so what I'm wondering is, do you think there is a place for data science in kind of helping to solve the current crisis? Well, there is definitely economic crisis that we're heading towards. And can you imagine perhaps some more specific applications of where it could be useful, if you think it could be useful?
Yeah, you know, this need to track the incidence of cases and visualize them in real time gave a big push to data visualization, which is one of the low-hanging fruits in data science. We have very high quality professionals in companies that have been hired, and they produce awesome proof of concepts in machine learning, statistics, and so on. but they have a hard time communicating these results to the rest of the organization. And the same happens when you need real-time analytics dashboards that will tell you incidents of a particular disease around the globe. And I think the pandemic gave us this ability to produce these visualizations, to observe how having access to this data is important to track the cases. People have had their first experience looking at the dashboard with a confidence interval, maybe for the first time. Here in the Netherlands, the government has a forecast trending chart that also has, has the error of the prediction on it. So this gave a big push towards data literacy. We hear a lot about data literacy also in companies because people perceived how important it is just to raise the quality of your questions and your a quick understanding, a quick visual, quick summary of what's happening at the moment from a dashboard. This was one. In the clinical trials, people started to follow, people understood what a placebo, or kind of understood what a placebo is, what a controlled experiment is, because of the population waiting for the vaccine. So you get familiar with some of these terms, the clinical trials. People know that a lot of our ability in our artificial intelligence is getting used to map DNA, RNA sequences, all these things that gave birth to the vaccine. So I would say that the average citizen got much more familiar with these methods, that you don't need to understand what's behind them very much. We would like to have everyone so literate on that, but it's impossible. But you have your citizenship a bit more guaranteed once you get familiar, at least at the level of awareness with some of these topics. So I see it as very similar to what happened with financial behavior, with a financial education debate years ago. Should we educate everyone about inflation, risks, diversification, or we simply should enroll them in a pension plan? It seems that being this more automatic system helped more, but you also support with some awareness education at the bottom. And in digital was the same. At some point we had digital literacy gaps, but as time passed, everyone started to have a smartphone, customer IDs, accounts in different applications, and we kind of solved it. Now it is happening the same with data literacy, and the pandemic accelerated this data literacy acquisition.
Moving on from COVID to the more generally data science and its impact on business, what do you see as current main challenges in applying data science in business, and what is the future? So what will we see in the next 5 years? What would be the hot topics?
Yes, yeah. So it's not software, the problem. It is mainly two factors: data governance and data integration. Now we have a problem related to the isolation of teams, isolation of data, and isolation of processes in companies and governments. So we do have the core data wranglers, but they are not communicating very well with the line of business to improve the processes and products that we need. The data, we have it siloed in marketing, in supply chain. The company does not monetize the value that is in this data, simply because most of the companies, they haven't created yet a system that brings this data in a let's say organized way, so the teams, they can use it. This is the concept of data warehousing or data fabric. It's more technical, but basically there is raw data and there is data that can be consumed or can be used in a model or in a dashboard. And this gap here is still huge. There's a huge chasm between these two extremes. So in the next 5 years, we'll be trying to solve these three main problems in the infrastructure side: the siloed team, siloed processes, siloed data. And we will be discovering our governance. You know, it happened in many other industries. Governance comes usually last after the first applications, after people understand that there is an economic value in the technology. You know, I like to use the example from the MP3 industry. You know, music in itself, if you tell the story of music and how it's sold in the last 20 years, you understand the steps, the innovation, the economic impact, and the governance building only at the end. Nowadays, we consume music through live stream on Spotify, but that was a huge fight in the 90s, early 2000s, when we had the first access to MP3 and the ability to exchange them via the internet. Same thing with data science. We are still building data privacy, ethical rules. Companies are trying to figure out what is to be a data steward, how not to be invasive, and customers are also understanding more what can be done on the company side with the data that they provide and they share with companies. And I think behavioral scientists, they will have a big role on this. What do you think?
So we talked a lot about kind of things in general and about skill sets. So tell me what you are currently working on, what makes you excited, what keeps you awake at night.
Yeah, so nowadays I'm very interested in bridging this last mile problem that exists in data science, because it's one of the main bottlenecks in the companies and professionals we work with. They cannot give birth to their ideas and get them implemented because there is a communication problem, visualization of the results problem. So there is a lot of intersection in this area between data science and design thinking. So how do we consider this end user of information, the decision maker that we talk a lot in behavioral science, but now in how do we create the user interface, or how do we create features that will help this person to actually consume the information and take actions based on it. I think this is what had been left on the side, and there's a lot of potential on that. Recently, for example, I took a UX training, a 12-week training myself to understand more of these concepts, and it helped me a lot to create frameworks, to do usability tests, do a healthy peer review with my colleagues before I produce the final version of something. I think the idea of cross-functional collaboration in companies that we see growing nowadays really helps us to reduce these costly mistakes, and that's something that I've been thinking a lot recently, how to make frameworks, ways of working that would reduce these costly mistakes by getting help from others as users, putting the user in first perspective as well.
So it sounds really exciting. So I mean, this is, I think you touched on many things here, both kind of from behavioral side and from data side, but also from systems approach, right? So how do you view this whole system as a whole? at the end of each interview, I ask several traditional questions, and everyone complains about them, I have to say. So, but I will ask them anyway. So the first question is, if I asked you to recommend one book and one film, what would your recommendations be? The limitation is you only have to pick one each.
The book.
Okay, so that's
This is
good.
easy.
Because normally everyone says, "Oh, of course I watched more than one film and read more than one book, so it's difficult."
Yeah, no,
That's good.
to recommend to people to read in the modern way of working that we have is blitzscaling. This book helps you to understand how the fastest growing companies did it, what is in the core of their way of work, and it's basically experimentation, data usage, making data useful. And it's a book that is a byproduct of the business development classes in the Silicon Valley that they gave to students taking computer science degrees, and they had many ideas, but how would they distribute their business ideas, to the investors and to the venture capitalists and so on. But it's also a good guide to understand the stages of growing ideas, companies, your personal brand. And there are many use cases from Airbnb, LinkedIn, that you can see the stylized facts that make companies grow currently. The film is very mainstream. I really enjoy The Godfather, the main character, Michael Corleone, because Michael is that guy who just came from the army, and he knows what is right to do, but his family background kind of forces him to continue the family tradition. And I think it's a conflict that really grabs our attention and teaches many lessons about the effect of your family background, and also how the circumstances they shape our decisions too.
So great recommendations. I don't think anyone has ever brought up Godfather on this in this series. So definitely, fantastic recommendations both on book and then film. And the final question that I kind of added to this list this year. And again, people complain about it, but it goes like this. So if I ask you to pick your favorite fictional character, whom would you pick?
I think I cited him already. It's Michael Corleone from The Godfather. Yes. He is the person who faces this conflict, and in this sense, it has a lot to do with the understanding of situational circumstances and your life choices. So it's a good character to follow in the same suggested movie as well.
Awesome. So this was Bernardo Nunes for you with his recommendations and his thoughts on data science, behavior, consumer choice. Thank you so much for finding the time to talk to me today, and I'm sure a lot of people will find this super interesting. And thanks a lot for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. Anyone who's willing to connect, I'm happy to on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and we'll discuss from there.
Yeah, so there will be links to Bernardo's profile in the description part of this video. So please do connect, and you have an opportunity to ask direct questions.
Yeah, sure.
I can also tell you that he responds very, very quickly to messages. So that's awesome.
That's true.
So thanks a lot. Thank you. And I hope to see more things from you, and definitely will be watching the space more closely. And thanks a lot again for coming.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.